The morning my mother-in-law died, I went into her closet, and there it was, my wedding dress, pressed, mended, the hem let down and taken up again so many times, the fabric remembered every change. I was 82 years old, holding the dress I had worn at 19, and I understood that I had never once known the woman who raised my husband. 63 years we lived on the same farm, and the most important thing about her I learned only after she was in the ground. Before I tell you what that dress was doing in her closet and what I found folded inside it, let me say who I am. My name is Anna. I grew up Old Order Amish in a settlement in Holmes County, Ohio, married into it, lived in it, and buried most of the people I loved inside it. I am 84 now. This is Hannah, the Amish girl, the channel where the things we were never permitted to say out loud finally get said. If you have ever loved someone for a lifetime and realized too late you never knew them, stay with me and tell me in the comments, what is one thing you wish you had asked someone before they were gone? I read them all. Now let me take you back, because to understand the dress, you have to understand the marriage. And to understand the marriage, you have to understand how little a girl like me was given to work with. I married Eli in the autumn of 1961. I was 19. He was 23. In our community, that was not young. Some girls married at 17, 18. By 19, the older women had already begun to look at you a certain way, a quiet, measuring look, the one that asked without asking whether something was wrong with you. So when Eli's father drove his buggy into our lane that summer, my mother cried with relief before she cried with joy. Eli was a good match. His family had land, 200 acres of good Holmes County bottom soil, and a mother, Eli's mother. Her name was Barbara, but everyone called her Mammy Barbara, even when she was still in her 40s, because she carried herself like someone who had already seen the end of things and come back quiet. She was a widow by then. Eli's father had died young, a horse and a wet field, and a wagon that went over wrong, and she had run that farm alone with her sons for 11 years before I ever set foot on it. 11 years. Remember that number. It comes back. The first time I met her, she looked at me for a long moment and said only, "You'll do." Then she went back to her bread. I was terrified of her for the first 10 years I knew her. Here is what people outside our world do not understand about an Amish marriage in those days. You did not marry a man. You married a household, a farm, a mother-in-law, an ordnung, the whole machinery of a life already running, and you were the new part dropped into it, expected to turn at the same speed as everything else, without anyone stopping to show you how. I moved into the Daadi house side of Barbara's farmhouse the week after the wedding. My wedding dress, plain and blue the way ours were with the white cape and apron, I folded into a cedar chest and did not expect to see again. We did not keep wedding dresses as keepsakes. There was no white gown to preserve under glass. A dress was a dress. You wore it to the wedding, and then it became your good church dress until it wore out, and then it became a work dress, and then it became rags, and then it became a rug. That is the Amish life of a dress. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is sentimental. Things are used until they are gone. So you can imagine, on our first anniversary, the autumn of 1962, when I came down the lane from the garden and saw Barbara standing in her own kitchen wearing my wedding dress. I knew it was mine. I had taken in the left shoulder myself, because I was built narrow on that side. The seam was unmistakable. She was a larger woman than me, and she had let it out at the waist, but the shoulder was mine. She stood at the stove in my wedding dress, stirring something, and when I came in, she did not explain. She said, "Sit, eat," and we ate. And I was 19 and terrified of her, and I did not ask. The next year, the same. The third anniversary, the same. Every single year, on the date of my wedding, Barbara would rise before dawn, take my wedding dress from wherever she kept it, wear it through the whole of that day, and at sundown return it to the cedar chest, washed and pressed, as though nothing had happened. She never spoke of it. I never asked. For the first years, I thought it was cruelty, some old widow's way of reminding the young wife who truly ran the household. Later, I thought it was madness, the kind that grows quiet in a woman who has buried too much. Later still, I simply stopped seeing it, the way you stop seeing the crack in the ceiling you have looked at for 30 years. This went on for 27 years. Let me tell you what kind of woman Barbara was in those years, so you understand why I never dared to ask. She did not waste words the way she did not waste cloth. She prayed on her knees on the bare floor until she was past 80, and her knees were ruined for it. She delivered half the babies in our church district, mine among them, 4 of my 7. She sat with the dying. When the Yoder barn burned, she was the first woman there with bread and the last to leave. The bishop deferred to her quietly, in the way men in our world sometimes deferred to a woman everyone pretended had no authority. She frightened me, and she anchored me. And somewhere in the 3rd decade of living beside her, I realized I loved her more than I had ever loved my own mother, and I had still never asked her about the dress. I want to stop here because what comes next, I did not learn for many more years, and when I learned it, it rearranged everything I thought I knew about the 63 years I spent on that farm. What happened over the next 11 Sundays, and I cannot carry it in 20 minutes. There are things this recording cannot hold. The names, the counting, the drawer, the dress I kept for 27 years. 3 years ago, I wrote it all down. The book is called The Sundays. The link is in the description and the pinned comment. Now, Barbara wore my dress for 27 years, every anniversary, and then she stopped. The year I turned 70, she did not put on the dress. I noticed, of course I noticed, after 27 years of the same silent ceremony. But she was 89 by then and slowing, and I told myself she had simply grown too tired, or the dress no longer fit, or she had finally forgotten, the way the very old begin to forget. That is what I told myself. It was that same year, the year I was 70 and she was 89, that she called me to sit beside her bed one evening. The lamp was low. The house was quiet, my Eli already asleep, the grandchildren gone home. She took my hand, which she had almost never done in 40 years, and she told me. She had been married before Eli's father. I did not know this. No one knew this. She had married at 19, the same age I was, a boy from a neighboring district, in a plain blue dress her own mother had sewn. 11 days after the wedding, he was dead. A fever that came through the settlement that autumn and took the young and the old and left the rest. 11 days a wife and then a widow at 19, in a community where a widow with no child and no farm was a burden passed from household to household until someone took pity and married her. Her wedding dress, the one her mother sewed, was buried with him. The bishop's decision. He had no good clothes to be laid out in, and the dead must be decent before God. And a dress that had been worn 11 days was the cloth at hand. So they buried her marriage on his body, and she stood at the grave in a borrowed black dress that did not fit, 19 years old, and she had nothing left of the 11 days at all. Not a thread. She married Eli's father 2 years later, the way a widow married, quietly and without much joy. And she made a life, and it became a good life. And she never told a soul about the boy or the 11 days or the dress they put in the ground. And then I came up the lane in the autumn of 1961, 19 years old, in a plain blue wedding dress with the shoulder taken in, and I gave it to a cedar chest and forgot about it. And she could not forget about it, because once a year, she told me, she needed to wear a wedding dress through a whole day and keep it. Just keep it. Just have for one day the thing she was never allowed to keep. She chose my anniversary because it was the closest thing in that house to her own, and because she could not bear to make a new dress that would have raised questions, and because mine was already there, folded in the dark, asking to be used. I should have asked you, she said to me, all those years. I should have told you. But if I had said it out loud one time, I would have had to feel all of it. And I had a farm to run and sons to raise and no room in me to feel it. So I kept it in the dress instead. She stopped wearing it the year I turned 70 because that was the year she finally told me. Once it was spoken, she said, she did not need the dress anymore. The dress had been the place she put the words she could not say. And now the words were out, and the dress could go back to being only a dress. She died 12 years later at 101, and I was 82. And I went into her closet, and there was my wedding dress, pressed and mended and let out and taken in, and folded inside it a square of blue cloth no bigger than my hand, a scrap she had cut from her own buried dress before they closed the coffin, the one thing she had dared to keep, hidden inside the lining of mine for 27 years while she wore it. I had been carrying her whole grief on my anniversary for almost 3 decades and never once felt its weight. I am 84 now. I have learned late the words for what Barbara did. She lived in a world that gave women endurance and called it faith, that gave them silence and called it modesty, that took a girl's 11 days of marriage and buried them in the ground because the dead man needed clothes, and a living widow's grief was not a thing the community had any use for. She was not mad, and she was not cruel. She was a woman who had been allowed to keep nothing, and who found one small way once a year, in secret, to keep something anyway. And the most faithful, most stubborn act of love I ever witnessed in 63 years on that farm. I watched her perform every single anniversary, and I thought it was about me, and I was too afraid to ask. And it was never about me at all. If you have ever lived beside someone for a lifetime and only understood them after they were gone, I see you. If your people taught you that grief was something to be swallowed, and that asking was a kind of weakness, I see you too. There is no faith that requires a woman to bury every tender thing she ever held. There is no God who needs your sorrow kept silent to be holy. Barbara taught me that, though she did not mean to, and she taught it to me too late to tell her I understood. The Sundays, what 20 minutes cannot hold. The link is in the description and the pinned comment. The morning is yours, if you decide it is. If this story stayed with you, tell me in the comments what part you carry away. And if you want more of the truths we keep behind the prayer cap, Subscribe to Hannah the Amish Girl. There is so much I have not yet said.